Morning, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg again, another fireside deer hunting seminar. Today, I'm kind of sad. You'll know why in a little bit, but this is one of the most important seminars I've ever created in my life, I believe. And it's mostly about wolves. Don't click off right here, because you aren't interested in wolves because you don't have any wolves where you hunt. But the way things are going nowadays, people are being anxious to put wolves into new areas all across the country, thinking it'd be really nice to have wolves there. And what you're going to learn is could be a big mistake. Because wolves are not good neighbors for farmers and even suburban areas. They can start being really hard on pets like little pussycats and pet dogs. And there's a lot of reasons why wolves are not a good choice for being a neighbor. But they are magnificent animals. And I've felt fortunate most of my life. Since I was 10 years old, I've lived close to wolves. And I've studied wolves now for, about 62 years. The first 30 weren't really productive of wolf study time, but after 1990, I finally gained the trust of our big pack of wolves that lived in my study area close to the Ontario border. It took a long time to get to that point before I could finally see wolves moving around in the daytime doing normal things like hunting deer. Or when I say daytime, back then it was usually early in the morning, first light, and here they come, big 12-member pack of wolves walking single file down a cruise trail in search of some deer to eat. That was really amazing, really awesome. Well, most of you have never seen a wolf in the wilds, and you could even go up to where I hunt deer and walk there for the next 30 days every day and never see a wolf. Or at least, say 10 years ago, or even a year ago, you wouldn't see them. You had to be sitting very still in a tree stand, and those wolves had to learn to trust you before you'd start seeing them up close. And so I was fortunate. Not many people have had a chance to study wolves firsthand and learn a lot of things that I've learned about wolves and about things they did that helped us humans become much better buck hunters. Why, some of the things they taught us were invaluable, and they still are for hunting older bucks, and probably always will be. And I've been really thankful that I learned these things from wolves for a long, long time. But most people never get a chance to see that. But what kind of bugs me all the time, ever since I started these wolf studies, that all kinds of people that didn't have a chance to know much about wolves of the Boundary Waters Wilderness area of Minnesota, which is part of the area that I'm talking about, the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. Nobody gets to see those wolves. They can pretend they know a lot about wolves because of pictures they've seen in magazines and stories about them, or because they get this literature from people that want you send money to help save the wolves. There's quite a few organizations that do that sort of thing, and those people have made a serious mistake. And I've been warning people it would be a mistake, and now it has been. What's happened is, my wolf pack has been getting smaller over the years because of lack of food, because these wolves have been starving. But my wolf pack and their pups died of starvation this past winter. They could no longer find enough food to get through winter. The whole bunch, all the wolves we've known so many years, they're gone. They died of starvation. A really cruel and inhuman way for wolves to have to perish. But Mother Nature, if humans can't manage wolves, and these wolves haven't been managed, they really haven't been really managed at all. They've been on the Endangered Species Act, which protects them from being reduced in numbers as long as they're in the Endangered Species Act. But the funny thing about it, in the year 2012, they were no longer endangered, not even threatened. And they were taken off the Endangered Species Act and turned over to the Department of Natural Resources here in Minnesota for management. Now, almost all the non-game and game animals in North America are managed, and they benefit from them. If they get to be too numerous, they have to have their numbers reduced, like our wolves. Our wolves were allowed to increase to huge numbers by the year 2000. They were starting to starve already. This is when our wolves started migrating all over Minnesota and to the Dakotas and Iowa and across Wisconsin and upper Michigan, because there was no more room for any more wolves to establish home ranges. Back in the old days, until that time, home ranges of wolves were 100 square miles in size, plus or minus, usually plus. It might be 125 square miles in size. It varies. But that's a lot of country, but they protect their hunting ranges from other wolves. And other wolves invade them and they would kill them or chase them out of there. And so they were able to have an exclusive hunting area of their own, each pack. But things were getting out of hand, but the problem is, people involved with these court cases to get the wolves put back on the Endangered Species Act, because the Minnesota Department of Resources were planning to reduce their numbers because they were eating cattle and pets and pet dogs and cats, and they were just bad neighbors to have all across northern Minnesota. And people were worried about their little kids being out there when the wolves were around, that sort of thing, and rightfully so, because wolves can be dangerous. And their history of attacking humans is not good. It's always a possibility. But, you know, all the years I've studied wolves, I've been attacked a couple times. But I won't even go into that now. But generally, wolves can be pretty decent to have around, and then people love to hear them howling out there in the woods and shivering over the sound of it, that kind of thing. And I love it. I really like wolves. And to all of a sudden spend a lot of time in an area where you never hear a wolf howl, what a sad thing that is as far as I'm concerned. It's like saying this is no longer a wilderness. When it's a wilderness, wolves can thrive in a wilderness, but they don't thrive well next to a lot of ranches or farms in the country where they can become destructive to cattle and other farm animals. They aren't good neighbors. So we've been lucky in Minnesota. Our arrowhead country is the size of Massachusetts. There are not many roads through that part of Minnesota, and it's really scenic, and a lot of lakes in there, beautiful area, and it's been just a wonderful area for wolves to live in. But they got to be too numerous, and by the year 2018, they had eaten all the deer they could eat. The original population of 22 deer per square mile by 2018 had been reduced to 3 per square mile. And those surviving deer were some smart deer and smart does in those benches. And they did a lot of things that make it really impossible for our remaining wolves to reduce their numbers anymore. And numbers were about the same from 2018 to 2021, and we'll see how it looks this year in November. But at any rate, it was so wrong to let them get to be that numerous that they started eating beavers and squirrels and everything else in that wilderness. 10 square miles I've been wandering around with since 1990 is like a ghost town. It's a ghost forest. Hardly any animals anywhere. And that's really sad. Nothing like it was. And because of that, the wolves were desperately hungry, and we even had them stuck two of my grandsons last year during the deer season. My 13-year-old, in his first hunt on opening morning, had the alpha male of our pack stuck within 10 feet of him before he realized it was there, and he when he first told me about it, when I went to his stand site after he shot into there, his eyes were real big and he was rushing toward me. He says, "Grandpa was a big scary wolf." And I had lectured the day before to everyone in my hunting group what to do if they're stalked or attacked by a wolf. And then he said, and I shot it in the air like you said I should do, and it ran away. And so that took care of that. But it was what a scary thing for a 13-year-old. And actually, now I have a 24-year-old who was stalked by the pack, all the wolves. And when he got back to camp, he said that was the spookiest experience he's ever had in the woods as a hunter. It was really scary. So anyway, that happened. And then so I've been, for the last couple of years, I've been warning people, you know, if those wolves are not taken off the Endangered Species Act soon, they're going to start starving to death. Mother Nature's going to take over. Because as an ages pass, any time the predator to prey ratio really gets out of the rack, that the predators get to be so numerous, then they've eaten all the prey animals, and the primary prey of our wolves are white-tailed deer. Up in Ontario, especially northern part of Ontario, their primary prey are moose. Ontario's had a historic high of wolves now for some time, and some of the wolves that are in Minnesota probably came from there. And they're good moose hunters. So Mother Nature did take over. Last year I warned everybody, this winter we're going to lose a lot of wolves to starvation because they don't have food. It's just nothing for them to eat there. We had about 20 inches of snow in our hunting. It wasn't a real severe winter, but we had at least 20 inches of snow in our area for the second half of our winter last year. And even a wolf can't get a mouse, even a mouse with that much snow on the ground. And so they had to be starving. I couldn't see how they could possibly get through the winter. And we were anxious to find out how they did. My son John and I put out cameras in early May, first part of May. And after 2 months, last Saturday, we finally got back up there. We retrieved our cameras or exchanged cards and cameras we had placed in the woods. Most of John's cameras, it would tell us how our whitetails fared last winter. My cameras were all set in places where I knew I would get photos of wolves. And one was a gathering place where they like to gather in the evening for years and years and huddle just before sundown. Kind of a happy powwow before going out hunting in the evening. And the other was a little more open area. These are along an ancient logging trail. A little more open area because where I knew wolves went up and down, because this was a scene where the wolf pack had stalked my oldest grandson up there last year. So I figured, well, this would be a perfect spot to photograph wolves. And the other area, those were the two best areas as far as I was concerned. And I wasn't disappointed. Well, one of the disappointments, though, was the fact that our original pack no longer existed. They were nowhere in any of these photos, not a one. Which would be great for our deer because, boy, then more of our ponds could survive, and with our deer population we could expect to start improving when this happened. And eventually I knew there would be wolves in that area again, but it might be a long time with the way things were going. Unfortunately, we discovered on our cameras, John and I spent hours combing through about 4,000 photos our cameras had taken, looking at deer and other animals we might see. There was moose and bears, found 3 bears, two sows with a single cub, cute little cubs. They were so close, they were looking into the lens of the camera. 2 sows with cubs, one grumpy looking male, and I think he was in a sow ranch because if I recall, midsummer is a time when bears breed. That's probably what he was there for, but he was a decent looking bear. And moose We photographed moose as well. The pictures we got of moose gave us a reason that, gee, the last few years, the moose population seems to be improving. Not a lot, but a little bit, because our pack had been reduced to 3 because they weren't producing pups to replace normal losses of the adult wolves. Now, adult wolves only live 5-6 years. They live a tough life, they do. And without pups, after they lost some adult wolves, they didn't have any young wolves to take their places. And this is happening all over the Arrowhead region. The wolf packs were becoming smaller because they weren't having pups anymore. Well, last year, unexpectedly, our pack did have pups for the first time in years. And we found their tracks all over this gathering area that I talked about, where I put a camera, just full of wolf tracks. They were running around like pups playing. There were so many of those tracks, we didn't know for sure how many pups there were, but it had to be 2 or more. And then, evening before opening day last year, the wolf pack had moved up within about 100 yards of one of our deer camps, where the tents were put up by my sons Dave and Ken and their families, sons and wives. They came pretty close to that tent, and it just howled. Oh man, it was really loud from where we were. Everybody that night, you could hear those whole howls echoing, and amongst the howls were all kinds of yipping and yapping that are typical of small wolves when their parents are howling. So they don't howl like a big wolf, they yip and yap instead. But they like to make a lot of noise anyway. They were there, but I knew they would have a bad winter, and it was, and they all died. And that really makes me sad. It makes me mad too, because it didn't have to happen if they had had proper management since at least 2012, when they were no longer endangered. Somehow people got the idea, no, you can't let anybody kill those wolves. And this is what happened. It backfired. That kind of thing backfired badly on the wolves. Not only on the wolves, but on our deer as well, because they got so numerous. So now they're starving to death because they no longer have food out there. And the Endangered Species Act provides no provisions for making sure those wolves always have enough to eat. Well, they should have never put overabundant wolves on the Endangered Species Act to begin with, but they were able to convince judges that it should be done. So that's what happened. Well, anyway, when we started looking at our new photos from our trail cams this past week, we were just astonished, because we had a whole bunch of new wolves in there. I mean, it's completely new wolves. We compared each one with all of the shots we had of our previous wolves, and they were always different. These were different wolves. Some of the black ones looked like our black ones, but our black ones last year were pure black. They didn't have any other colors, I'm just black. And this new pack that moved in, that looks, if you didn't compare pictures, it looks almost like our original alpha male from our pack. But they were different. These were different wolves. Here's the alpha male of our original wolf pack, and he was the alpha wolf for quite a few years. And he's a wolf that stalked my youngest son Jacob on opening morning of deer hunting last year. And he's been the boss of this pack, this wolf pack, from when they were consisted of 4, 5, 6 wolves on. Now, wolves don't usually live that long, but he's lived that long. Now, here's the 2 other wolves of the pack. They were both black. They're pretty much all black. And they're photographed next to a gut pile from a deer my son David took on opening morning in 2020. And so the 2 black wolves, they're smaller in size. That gray one is huge. These 2 are smaller in size, and I don't know if that means they're younger or they're just smaller in size, but there they are. And they made a name for themselves by stalking my older grandson, Tyler, 4 days later. But there they are, and they're doing what they used to do a lot, is follow, when they hear a shoot, they come running because they knew they were going to get a easy meal. One of their favorite foods is the entrails of a white-tailed deer. These are the mature wolves that died of starvation last winter, along with their pups. And so that's the end of this pack. The pack that's been ruling my steady hunting area near the Canadian border for a long time. I'm going to introduce you to our new wolf pack that arrived in our steady hunting area. It appears to sometime during the last 2 months after we set out our cameras in early May. And they're quite a bunch. It was impossible to get the entire pack in the picture at the same time, but we've gotten pictures of those wolves passing in that area together, one or two at a time. We see them on these pictures. Now guys, I'm going to show you our new wolf pack. It moved in sometime between the first part of May, I believe, and they've been there. They were there until we picked up our cameras on the 30th of July. And for those of you who have never seen wolves, and that includes an awful lot of people, this is your chance to get a good look at wild gray wolves. They aren't all gray. They can be all different colors. We got almost seems like a ragamuffin group here with every color imaginable in wild wolves except white. And this first picture here, you'll see one of our wolves that looks black from a distance. He's mostly dark brown, and he's got some black areas on the body, and he's one of our wolves. And this particular black one might be a dominant wolf. It might be an alpha wolf. I'm not sure yet. All right, here's another photo of the dark brown one, which I think is a candidate for being the alpha male or female of this pack. And this is a large wolf too, a really big one. The wolf behind them there is the only wolf in this pack that looks like a common gray wolf. It's a gray wolf, no doubt about it. And he looks a lot like our gray wolf that's been in that area for a number of years, which was an alpha male. We compared photos. Gee, we went 1,000 photos looking at all these things, and compared these wolves side by side with our original wolves, and they are definitely all different wolves. And that's how we found out that our wolves no longer exist in that area. Anyway, these are two of the pack right here. Well, here's another photo of those two wolves, the dark brown ones, and then a gray wolf. Here's another photo of the two wolves. Here's a wolf I believe is the alpha male of this pack. He's really a large wolf, and he's a real pretty one. He's tan one. And we'll show you another picture of that particular wolf here in a bit. But he's a big wolf, and he's the kind of wolf that I think could be the alpha male. And beyond this wolf in this photo is one of the black wolf. Looks black from the distance, but he's a big black wolf. This black wolf is relatively normal, and he doesn't look quite as beat up and skinny as the other black one. And so this is one of the two black or really dark colored wolves in our pack. And here's some more pictures of them, close-ups. Here's that same wolf. Well, here's another member of the pack. He resembles that larger tan wolf, or it looks almost reddish depending on whether he's in the sun or not. He looks the same. He looks like he's probably a progeny of that, what I believe is the alpha male of this pack right now. And but take a look at him. He's smaller. He's probably the last one to be able to sit down at the dinner table with these wolves. And he's starving. And look at his tail, how skinny it is. And look at his belly area there. He's not a fat wolf. He's he's on starvation diet. And you can see this is one of the wolves. I tell you, boy, these wolves are really hungry. They're desperate for food. And in a way, I kind of like this wolf. He's kind of a pretty thing too, but the poor thing is probably one of the first wolves that would die from starvation in this bunch. Well, interestingly, here's another black wolf. It's different than the one that we've showed you a few times. Doesn't have those white spots on its back. It isn't the same. It's probably related. It's a smaller wolf, and but these pictures of that wolf showed up a significant time after the other wolves passed the camera. So we're not quite sure if he's a actual member of the pack or one that's just hanging back and following that pack. But it would make sense that he's a member of the pack. Okay, here's a close-up of that wolf. And you look at how skinny he is. Here's that what I believe to be the dominant wolf again. He's he's mostly tan. In the lesser light here, he looks darker. He's the only wolf we saw that had food in his mouth. He's carrying a chunk of meat, and a chunk that size probably came from a deer. And but here's a good picture of him, and it kind of proves they're getting meat. But remember one thing. We're looking at daytime pictures. Well, there's two things really screwy about this pack. Well, I'll get back to that in a little bit. Well, here's another picture. Here's a picture of this lighter colored wolf, tan or brown, light brown. And a nice broadside picture there. And boy, he's a wolf. You would say, boy, that's a magnificent wolf. And it is. It's really a beautiful wolf. And, it can be fearful of these things. It can be doing terrible damage to your deer population. But you have to admit, some of these wolves are really beautiful animals. And this certainly qualifies as one of those. Now we have them there. Well, boy, isn't that something? If you've never seen a wolf in the wild, boy, here's your chance. Here's a bunch of wolves, wolves in the wild. We got some really nice photography of them and lots of pictures. Not way more than what you're going to see here. But anyway, if you didn't know wolves very well, and a lot of people don't know how many wolves are, they're going to say, oh boy, isn't that look nice, all those big nice wolves living in that area. The people that wouldn't want to have them reduced in number would be saying that. And boy, the Endangered Species Act made this possible for these wolves to be there. Well, the wolves were there because they were starving. This is a pack in terrible trouble. And because there was only 5 or 6 in the pack, probably 6, indicates they're in trouble. That's one thing. The pack size, normal healthy wolves will have much larger pack sizes. And they'll have hunting ranges of 100 square miles or more. And when they get to be small, they have smaller. They can't keep that large an area, so they start hunting in a smaller area. And then they start hunting day and night because they're having a hard time finding food there because of that. So it all just snowballs into something terrible. Well, these wolves, if they stay, I'm thinking that they moved into a house with no food into it. There's some new food. There's other animals being born, and as you saw in one of those previous pictures of these wolves, one was carrying a piece of meat in its mouth. And a chunk that size had to come from a sizable animal. I don't know if it would be a beaver or a deer, a fawn. But the fawn part worries us because in all the photography we took, in one portion of our hunting area, the south and east part, we found deer and more yearlings than we've seen in years, because last year what does were doing was really helping to preserve the fawns that remained, and I noted that our fawn population had improved because of what those does were doing, and a lot of those fawns became yearlings this year. We found no fawns in photography in that portion of our studying area, which makes it look like this new pack had already been hard on our fawns born in the second half of May. Maybe they've been in there and they already cleaned out fawns. You know, the wolves in my study area since 1990 had been eating 3 out of 4 fawns every year. 3 out of 4 every year, between the second half of May and the 1st of November. And we were keeping track of fawn numbers from May until the 1st of November every year. And then a track of how many were left. And by November 1st, you were lucky to see one fawn, one surviving fawn, for 2 mature does. You see a lot of does, no fawns. And that was the same story for quite a few years. And it was happening before our wolves began starving. This was going way back to 1990, and they certainly weren't starving then. It was a great big wolf pack, you know. By the year 2000, they had become so numerous that they were running out of food, nothing more to eat. And apparently the litigants in those federal trials had turned them back into this Endangered Species Act and giving them the total protection they were getting, didn't know wolves were starving. And I wouldn't surprise me that if I told these guys, well, you don't know they're starving, how am I going to tell them to find out? They said, well, go in our woods and walk around and you'll find out. They could walk there for a month when it's full of deer, when it's even full of wolves, even a lot of wolf pack, if it was 12 in the pack, they wouldn't see any wolves. It takes a long time to see wolves. They're really secretive, and they spend a lot of time in their big 100 square mile hunting areas, and they used to hunt only at night. Well, you don't see wolves out there just walking around. And so those wolves have to learn your trust, and you have to be a stand hunter, a good one, to be able to start seeing them moving around doing the things they normally do in their relationships with deer. So none of those people could know they were starving. If they had, there's no way that it would have been logical to put those wolves back in the Endangered Species Act. But they didn't know the wolves were starving. And I don't know if anybody did. But I sure did, and I was really worried about how it was going. So now we got this new pack in there. And several things can happen. One is, it can be really hard on our fawns this year, and maybe some yearlings too. And we have increased yearlings, increased numbers of fawns that were born last year become yearlings this year. And remarkably, we can account for 9 at least, maybe more, but I know there was 9, and of those 9, 7 were bucks. We're going to have a whole bunch of forkies and spike bucks running around our woods this year, and we usually ignore them. But it might give our grandson a better chance of taking the deer this year. So that another spike buck might be one of the deer would be taken home this fall. But that was an improvement. Now this larger pack could really change that picture. Another thing that could happen is that they're starving there, and they might decide, we got to go somewhere else, find a better place to hunt. And all of a sudden one day, between now and then in November, they could disappear. This place, they might decide this place is bad or worse than where we lived. They left their previous home range because they weren't getting enough food and they were starving, and several of the wolves in that pack really were starving wolves. I mean, you didn't have to know a lot about wolves to know there's something wrong with that wolf over there. Look how skinny he is, and look at his fur, and look at their tails. Boy, that wolf is not healthy. Well, that's what one of the indicators is, that they're a pack in trouble. They're heading toward the same fate our wolves, the original wolves, had because of a lack of food. Another thing that tells you it's in trouble, there were no pups in that group. No pups. And so all of those wolves there, I don't know what their ages are, when they get to be 5 to 6 years of age, very few of them are going to survive their 7th winter. Winter is the most deadly time for wolves that are starving. And I wrote in one of my recent articles that when our wolves were again put on under the Protection of Endangered Species Act, I think it was February 10th this year, after they've been a presidential decree had taken them off the Species Act. So this year, they were those pro-wolf people and anti-hunters were again able to put these wolves back under the Protection of Endangered Species Act. And they've created a catch-22. And if you don't know what it means, well, here I'll tell you how it's affecting wolves. The wolves cannot improve their numbers because they're starving. They don't have enough food. Our deer can't improve their numbers because the remaining wolves are killing 3 or 4 fawns every year. That's a catch-22. There's something wrong here, but nothing can do anything about it because the wolves are being protected, totally protected by the Endangered Species Act. So this situation we have right now is going to keep going on, and more and more wolves are going to die of starvation. And it can't be helped. And it's a ruthless way to reduce wolves' numbers. If wolf numbers can't be regulated by humans, Mother Nature will take over and do the job, and it's ruthless and cruel and inhuman for them to be starving to death the way they are. But it's going to keep happening to our wolves until there aren't many wolves there anymore. Like in ages past, it's always happened. This predator-prey program has always been that way. Now, in modern game management, that doesn't need to happen. You know, those wolves under management are always going to be at a good number, so that it ensures that all their prey animals can keep reproducing, and there are lots of deer and beavers or anything else they want to eat. They aren't going to be starving anymore, and they'd be hauling every night. All those kinds of things. That's wonderful for the wolves to be managed. Us humans have been unable to manage wolves now since 1974 in the Arrowhead country. And it took a while, but eventually, when Mother Nature took over, she's taken over this past winter, and that's not the end of it by any means. Additional wolves there are going to starve every winter. That's a critical time because there will be no food where they live. And that's going to just keep happening in the wolves. And instead of being kind and humane to our wolves by putting them on the Endangered Species Act, it's backfired. And you're being amazingly cruel and inhuman toward these animals by putting them back on the Endangered Species Act. It was this last federal judge decision to put them back in the Endangered Species Act is about the worst thing that ever could happen to the wolves and deer in our area. So that's going to keep happening. And even if they were taken off the Endangered Species Act tomorrow, it's already too late. Because those deer are not going to be real numerous enough to support all those wolves in 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years, 4 years. Somewhere along the line, if Mother Nature doesn't do the job complete in a few years and there's hardly any wolves left, those deer are not going to be able to recover to their former numbers. And they haven't been able to do that since 1974. They never got to be 22 deer per square mile in that area ever since 1974. And slowly, but it starts to go faster and faster, and you get down to where the pack sizes are small enough and they can't get any deer that are left there. Then it starts going pretty rapidly. Their major source of food is gone. Now this new pack, I don't know where they came from. It might have been a neighboring pack having similar problems. They might have come a long way before they found this new range here. There's no wolves here. So Or they might have come down from Ontario where they've had lots of problems. If they're Ontario wolves, they're going to be hard on our moose, and deer as well. So we'll wait and see. But maybe, just maybe, they're going to say, oh, this is a total disappointment in this area, let's go find another place. Okay, now I was saying there were things that were wrong now about this pack. There was only 6 at most in the pack. A good healthy pack will have 10 to 12 mature wolves and a couple pups in it in the fall. Always some pups there to replace normal losses of older wolves. And so, but they have to have the pups there too. This was a pack half as small as a really healthy pack would be, and they have no pups there. So they were starving, and these wolves were not getting enough nutrition to give birth to pups or to raise pups after they're born, because they can't get enough food for them. They just die. So it's kind of a tough life for them. So we'll wait and see. If they stay, they're going to have an impact on our current fawns. Now, like I said, you know, a good portion of my study area this year, our cameras in a good portion of our study area found no spotted fawns. Remarkably, where some of these great pictures of wolves were taken, there was a doe that had twin fawns. Nice spotted twin fawns. And this time of year, fawns are always with their mothers. You know, when they're really young, the mother leaves them in place in the woods, hidden, and goes away to feed and drink water, and then comes back to it. But by this time of year, the fawns are big enough, so they can go along, and they're learning then how to live in the wilds on their own. So it takes 2 years for that education, but they're learning right now. And so here's a picture of those 2 spotted fawns. Now, aren't they beautiful? And boy, the way it stands right now with all those wolves in this area, these 2 fawns don't have much of a chance to grow to maturity. And I'd be really surprised if those 2 fawns were still there next November or September when I start photographing that era again, and that in a larger area, actually. So, you know, trail cams have been a great instrument for studying wolves and deer. And we're enjoying what we're learning so much from our trail cams that we keep getting more and more of them. But we learned long ago they're pretty lousy for enabling you to take more bucks, because it just keeps happening. People like my son Dave has done it, and I mentioned before, one trail up there, he photographed 7 different antlered bucks, some of them not really nice ones, going toward a beaver pond to drink water. It was a favorite watering spot. And they were coming off a big hill west of there, going all the way to that spot to drink water, back and forth. And the following year, after he got all those pictures, we were really excited about it, and he had tree stands near both, or 2 ends of this trail. He never saw one. That's pretty typical. And ever since then, we've learned that that's pretty typical. Because what whitetails are doing before hunting season, before does are in heat, can be quite different after the does are in heat. And that's what happened. And that year we took 4 mature bucks, and they were all in those pictures that Dave had taken, and all of those deer had been taken quite a distance away from that trail. I think 1 or 2 of them a mile away. So you can't depend on what you get from trail cams to say, oh boy, it's a good spot, I'm going to hunt here and get that great big buck in my picture. And hunters are doing that all the time. But things have got to change now, and I'll get into that later, the way things are working out, and I'm not sure how our whitetails are going to be responding to these new wolves or their absence in the rest of the summer and into fall, but my trail cams this fall will tell us what happened. Keep this in mind. You may not have wolves in your hunting area today. No wolves there. and you don't have to worry about this stuff. But, you know, if you don't realize it, wolves are being reintroduced into the wild in lots of parts of the U.S. And generally, wherever it happens, after a while, the ranchers and farmers and residents in the area are starting to raise Cain about it. Gee, there's getting to be too many wolves here. I can't be in business if they're eating all my calves or my lambs or whatever they're raising. And the government, U.S. government, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and those people who live there, and hunters living there, again, and all kinds of arguments about what can be done, but nothing can be done as long as they're on the Endangered Species Act. And the people that like to keep wolves from being reduced never like to have them on the Endangered Species Act. So if you don't have wolves in your area today, don't believe it's never going to happen. Someday you're going to have wolf trouble if it keeps going on the way it is. The other thing to keep in mind is this. Global warming is worsening. We're having more hot weather during fall hunting season, October and November. Now, our whitetails grow new winter coats complete by the end of September. They're in their winter coats. And when temperatures are abnormally high, they don't want to be moving around during daylight hours. And global warming is getting worse and worse. We aren't yet at the point where we're necessarily going to have days too warm for whitetails to want to move around during the daylight hours, which is becoming more common. Our whitetails becoming more and more nocturnal. When it's too hot to move around the day, they wait till night to feed and water or take care of breeding at night only. And if you're a stand hunter sitting in the woods, how in the world can you hunt deer that don't want to move all day? It's like sitting out there watching paint dry. It's really boring. This global warming is ruining stand hunting. It's already ruined one of the important phases of the whitetail rut, which is not good for whitetails. And it's already making them increasingly nocturnal, increasingly moving only at night only. So whether you have noticed the difference, you're not seeing as many deer, not seeing as many older deer, or they seem to be much harder to hunt than they were, say, 10 years ago, it's global warming that's affecting your deer. Global warming is universal. It's everywhere in America, everywhere in North America. There's not a deer in America that's not being affected by global warming. And it can be pretty severe effects if they're just not moving around during daylight hours. And how in the world are we going to reduce whitetails by half every year so that we don't have millions of whitetails starving from lack of food in the winter every year? That's a serious thing. That's the primary reason we're deer hunters. We play such an important role in keeping whitetails from become too numerous for the carrying capacities, meaning for the amount of food that's left in winter of the ranges. So it's important that we hunt. Sure, we don't need the venison anymore. This country once lived on venison. The westward expansion was fed by venison. No, we don't need to have that venison today. But those whitetails need to be managed properly. And if we don't, they're going to be starving to death all over the place. And people are going to be running into them all over the place at night. That kind of thing. So they need to be reduced in number every year. That's important. Unless you got a lot of wolves. They've been reduced tremendously once those wolves get to be too numerous. Your whitetails are suffering from global warming just like mine. And I've been putting in in the last 4 years in particular, I've been putting in a lot of time on trying to figure out how to hunt whitetails that don't want to move around in the daytime. And it took 4 years to finally see some glimmers of ideas of what we can do to continue taking 4 mature bucks per year. That's been our self-imposed limit since 1991. We're not going to shoot those because the deer population is low. They're the ones, those are the only ones that can make babies. And we're going to take mostly older deer because most of them are useless in the whitetail population because they don't even get to breed. It's just a small percent, 10% of bucks that get to be breeding bucks. So you take a big buck that doesn't even get to breed, that's not going to affect the deer population very much. Although, if you just want big bucks, there's the biggest buck in every square mile is generally the dominant breeding buck. And they're smart. Yep. When you're hunting bucks 4.5 to 6.5 years of age, you're hunting bucks that already have been avoiding you successfully for 4.5 to 6.5 years. And that's why you don't see them very much. And you keep doing the same things every year. And boy, those older bucks have no trouble staying away from you because of that. It's bad enough, if there was no global warming, no wolf problems, they're still hard to hunt. And most hunters have never realized all the things they got to do to be regularly successful at taking trophy class bucks for the wall. They don't have to be record book bucks, but the kind you're pretty proud of and you have them mounted and put on the wall. And you smile every time you look over there when you think about the hunting season when you finally got one like that. And guys walk in and say, oh, they shake their head, that's such a beautiful buck. I wish I could get one like that. So a lot of us are desperate to get a bigger buck. That's fine, but we don't know how to do it. Never have. And as far as I know, I'm not bragging, as far as I know of no one. I've been an outdoor writer for 40 years now, writing magazine articles, 2 articles a month every year, and sometimes more, for 40 years. Imagine that. I think I'm one of the oldest still active outdoor writers in the country right now. And I love it. I love teaching, and I like to help people do better, but I'm the only one I know of who's done any extensive hunting-related studies of white-tailed deer, anywhere, and done it properly, scientifically. And I worked so hard and done it honestly to develop better ways to hunt so you can take older bucks. And I've been teaching that over and over. And you get a lot of people, they go, oh, that's not possible. You can't do that without scaring every deer in the woods. That's no way to hunt whitetails. And they come up with all kinds of things like that. And well, that sounds nice, but that doesn't work. It can't work. Well, it can't work if you don't know how to do it. But they ignore it. And the deer hunters, they commonly do that. Hard to convince them to change what they're already doing. And I've been trying to do this for years. Now, we got global warming and wolves screwing everything up. So now I'm finally in a position, after 4 years of new studies, to be able to tell you how to get whitetails and even older bucks with these kind of things happening in our woods today. So, believe it if you want, if you keep doing things the same old way, those older bucks are going to finally convince you Doc was right. So pay attention, guys. Don't overlook the kind of education you get from some old guy, whiskery guy who lives in the woods in Minnesota like me. But I've got a lot of good stuff to teach you so you can enjoy whitetail hunting like you never have, even though we got global warming and wolves badgering our deer. So this is important new stuff. Now, a lot of what I've taught you in the 10th edition will work in an area where you don't have wolves. Right now, today, most of that will work, except the hours. Because whitetails are feeding during different hours now. But you can still do a pretty good job of hunting with everything you learned in that 10th edition of my Whitetail Hunter's Almanac. And if you don't have one, get one. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be available forever. Those books are not. None of my books. My books that I started printing in 1980 are still selling. They never stop. People get one and then they want all the others. And 3 of them are out of print, or 4 of them out of print now. You can't even get them anymore, and people are selling them for up to $1,000 on eBay. How about that? Little $7.95 books that I wrote back in the 80s, now selling for $250 to $2,000 or $1,000. So that's kind of amazing. Well, my new books, one day they're going to go out of print. I'm going to gone, and you won't get them anymore. At 87, I can't tell you when. I hope it's not tomorrow, but it could. You know, it could happen. But my new book that's going to be coming out fairly soon, my 11th edition, is Solid Wolf and Global Warming Material. It teaches you how to hunt during these conditions. Global warming's not going to go away for a long time, and it's bad, getting worse. We all know it's getting worse, and more people are dying because of it than ever before. And all the storms we're getting now are much worse than they were before. And all the flooding. So it's going to get worse for a long time because finally it's going to be too warm all gun season every year in the fall instead of alternately between parts of your gun season. And the other parts will be maybe normal temperatures again. And sometimes you can even have subnormal temperatures, which make whitetails act more normally. But there's going to come a day when those normal and subnormal temperatures are no longer going to exist in October and November. And that's going to make hunting even harder unless you know what to do. You can still take whitetails if you know what to do, during legal hours, legally. But there's things you got to do different. So the new book covers what you got to do now today. And they're based on some of my older research that has proven what some of the new hunting methods that I'm prescribing are going to work. They're going to work. There's no way they're not going to work. And the new one-on-one hunting techniques that we're going to use, and tactics that we're going to use, one-on-one. You know, that's one guy hunting one buck or that buck, whatever, one-on-one. But a lot of these are going to be large group stand hunting. You put 6 guys stand hunting together and getting out in the woods and be 100 to 200 yards apart in a certain area where you know there's deer feeding and they're bedding in there and water's close by. You put a group like that out there in the woods, you know, half day or an entire day, people are going to get deer that way, then big bucks. So, lots to learn on my 10th edition and the bear book, same thing, same story. The new one. Those will make you more successful in the future. Long after I'm gone, you're going to look at them, those books, and they're getting all dog-eared and dirty and all. So this is an amazing book. What Dr. Nordberg taught in here is still working. And you're going to be glad you got it. and other people are going to want to borrow it. And no, sir, I'm not going to lose this one. People borrow my books like that, somehow lose them, and aren't able to bring them back to their friend who gave them the book to read and learn from. Oh, when you get one of those, you want to keep that at home or in camp, but not give it to someone else to use. Maybe after you die, they can have it. Well, it's going to be the same story with my 11th edition of Whitetail Hunter's Almanac. It's not going to be as large as the 10th edition. It'll be about the same size as my previous almanacs, but quite a bit thicker. But makes it a paperback book. You can put it in your hunting coat pocket and take it out in the woods with you when you're sitting there doing nothing in your tree stand. So that's going to be a good book. And I said that about the 10th book, the 10th edition. I said, well, that's my last one. But with all the big changes that have come about because of global warming and wolves, I just couldn't sit there and not do anything about it. I had to get busy, get some research completed, good hard research, and start telling people what to do about these adverse conditions in hunting season. So that's what that's all about. Okay, enough said. Now, before you leave, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Honestly, I want you to do it because it's important to me as a speaker for YouTube. It really is. It's so important. And the other one, if you like what you heard today or any other time, hit that thumbs up button too. Just click. That doesn't use any of your time. So do that, will you please, for me, as a favor to me. I would really appreciate it. So, anyway, guys, I think what you heard today is kind of special. Makes you worry. Well, what are you going to do in the future? There's not going to be anybody around who's going to be able to help you figure out how to manage to hunt deer during global warming and when you have excessive numbers of wolves, because no one's ever done that kind of research before. It might, what people that don't do that research, what they do, it may not be correct. Well, I know for years, ever since 1980, I've had writers all over the country copying my work and writing it, acting as if they were the ones that invented this. But they don't. They couldn't possibly do it. It's like people can't possibly know what's wrong with wolves because it takes a while, quite a while before you can even see wolves. And same thing with all the hunting things that I came up with. It takes a long time to do that. And most people that are in the business of writing magazine articles don't have that time. They're making money other ways because that's not a good way to make a living. And so they do their best with limited the time to do it. If they're good writers, they can make it sound interesting and good. But I don't know anyone who's been doing the kind of research I've been doing. So I'm your last I'm your last guy for helping you in this regard, in this kind of thing in the future. So keep that in mind. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you the truth. But like I say, if you don't want to believe it, that's fine. Hunt whatever way you want. But those older bucks are going to teach you. Eventually you're going to say, they are just impossible. And then you'll think, now that your Nordberg know how to do it, then I better get one of those bucks. Then you look them up and they aren't available anymore. That can happen. So with that, thanks again, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.